Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at some audio, quite an intense piece, actually.
Intense is a good word for it, yeah.
The speaker really kicks things off with this sense of, well, an emergency. They argue there's a plan to save humanity underway, but it's being attacked
Attacked by who, according to them?
by globalists and parasitic elites. That's the terminology used. And the speaker, they have a background in politics, in media, which they sort of leverage to give weight to these warnings.
Right, it sets up this dynamic where they're presented as someone with insider knowledge, seeing things others might miss. The stakes feel very high in their telling.
Definitely. So for you listening, our aim here is to, unpack these claims. We want to understand the arguments being made, see what evidence the speaker points to.
Exactly. It's about getting a handle on their perspective, the story they're telling, without us necessarily buying into the crisis framing wholesale. We're exploring the content.
Precisely. So the source itself, it's this audio recording, sounds like it was made not long after a presidential election.
And they claim it's based on solid ground.
Yeah, the speaker says they're interpreting real documents, real legislation, real political movements, offering, what they see as the unvarnished truth.
Okay, so our mission then is to break down those core arguments, see what points support them in the audio, and just get a clear picture of this specific viewpoint. Understand the message itself.
Right. Let's start with the positive bit, this plan to save humanity. What specific actions early on did the speaker see as part of this plan?
Okay, so initially there was strong approval voiced for some specific moves by the new president.
Like what?
Well, first off, pulling out of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the speaker notes that wasn't just a niche concern, right? There were worries across the political spectrum.
Okay, TPP withdrawal. What else?
Now, then there's the mention of moving to bring back Glass-Steagall.
Ah, right. The banking regulation from, what, the Depression era?
That's the one. Basically separating your regular high street bank from the riskier investment side of things. Some saw bringing it back as a way to make the system safer.
Got it. So big picture stuff, trade, finance.
Exactly. And then the speaker also pointed to efforts, or claimed efforts, to cut taxes for lower income people. And also executive actions targeting the Obamacare individual mandate. The requirement to have insurance or pay a penalty.
Right. That was a big one.
Defending borders was another point of approval. And finally, going after ISIS and al-Qaeda more aggressively, the speaker felt these groups had sort of flourished under previous administrations.
So quite a list. And the speaker's overall take was?
Very positive. Described these actions as, quote, wholesome and so good. Really strong endorsement in those early stages.
Interesting framing, tying all that into a plan to save humanity. But then the narrative shifts. Who are the attackers, the globalists and parasitic elites?
Right. This is where the conflict really comes in. The speaker paints these groups as, opportunistic, taking advantage of a public they see as uninformed.
Uninformed how?
Distracted, maybe, by entertainment, by other things. The speaker suggests these elites exploit that lack of focus.
Okay, and do they name names?
Oh, yes. Specific financial institutions, media outlets, Bloomberg, Reuters, AP, CNBC, the IMF, World Bank, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. Quite the list.
And the accusation is what exactly?
That they are, and this is the speaker's claim, publicly trying to crash the economy, deliberately, to undermine the president.
Wow, okay. Publicly trying to cause a crash. That's a very strong claim. What's the supposed motive?
According to the speaker, it's about shaking confidence. They argue these groups are telling people to sell stocks, dump investments, even when the speaker believes the market is doing well.
Trying to create a self-fulfilling prophecy, maybe?
Perhaps that's the implication. The speaker frames it as totally outrageous, saying it's the kind of thing that would get you punished in communist China. The idea is these globalists care more about their own power than anything else.
This seems to tie into the idea of sovereignty, doesn't it? National control versus global influence.
Absolutely. That's a huge theme. The speaker really hammers home the importance of restoring national sovereignty. They use examples like Brexit, and also what they see as the EU interfering with Italy as proof of the dangers of globalism, where nations give up authority to these larger bodies.
And this is a core principle for the speaker.
Seems to be.
Yeah.
They actually say that even if they disagreed with the president on almost everything else, they'd still back efforts to regain sovereignty. It's that fundamental to their view.
So sovereignty is paramount. And how does nationalism fit into this picture for them?
Nationalism gets presented very positively. It's positioned as the direct opposite of globalism,
And globalism is seen
as an oppressive anti-human system. That's the quote.
Yeah.
So nationalism in this view is about prioritizing your own nation, your own people, which they see as good, while globalism is destructive.
Okay, so there's the external globalist enemy. But the speaker also talks about opposition within the country, right? Closer to home?
Yes, definitely. They claim the president is basically surrounded. Enemies even within his own party, within the government structure itself.
Who specifically?
Well, they name some prominent establishment Republicans. Paul Ryan is mentioned, along with Lindsey Graham, John McCain, Mitch McConnell.
And there was that claim about funding.
Yes, an accusation that George Soros funded Paul Ryan. That's floated in the audio. The overall picture is of these figures and others in the federal government actively working against the president's plans.
Working against him how? What are they supposedly doing?
Leaks are a big one. The speaker points fingers, suggesting people like Reince Priebus, Paul Ryan might be leaking information to the media.
Why would they do that, according to this narrative?
To undermine the president, maybe curry favor with the old guard, the establishment, betting against his success, essentially.
Okay, leaks. Anything else?
Yeah, a major claim is that the State Department is in, quote, open rebellion.
Open rebellion? How?
The speaker talks about alleged resignations, officials writing letters criticizing the president, apparently for just implementing existing laws about who can enter the country.
So the State Department officials disagreeing fundamentally with the president's direction.
That's the assertion. The speaker goes further, suggesting the State Department thinks the president and also nationalist movements over in Europe are somehow aligned with Russia.
Aligned with Russia.
Yeah, and that the State Department is actively trying to undermine both the president and those European movements, even interfering in elections over there to stop nationalist candidates.
That's quite a conspiracy outline then.
It's a very detailed picture of internal and external opposition. Yeah.
Now, the speaker also talks about their own role in all this, their influence, their reach. What do they claim?
They make some pretty big claims, actually, talking about tens of millions of listeners every week.
Tens of millions. Where?
Across different platforms, regular radio, YouTube, Facebook. They also mentioned that going on another big podcast really boosted their numbers significantly.
So they see themselves as having a huge audience.
Definitely. And they had an interesting take on media criticism.
How so?
Basically, they see negative coverage from mainstream media not as a problem, but as proof they're being effective.
Like they wouldn't attack me if I wasn't a threat.
Exactly that kind of logic.
Yeah.
The more criticism, the more influential they must be. They suggest the public doesn't even realize how big their actual audience is.
And the language used to describe opponents.
Yeah.
It's pretty strong, isn't it?
Oh, very strong. Words like monsters, comparing them to the Republican establishment, they also criticize, calling them shameful, uninformed, stupid, even fascist.
So really drawing battle lines.
Absolutely. The narrative is the president is empowering the people against this whole system, both political parties, big finance, even the Vatican, communist China. Islamists are sort of looped in.
It's a very broad coalition of enemies.
And there's an even darker layer to it.
Oh.
Yeah, the speaker accuses the globalists of being, and this is their word, satanic.
Satanic? In what way?
In their desire to control and exploit everyone else. The speaker claims these elites view the general public as scum and roaches, just draining resources. It's a deeply adversarial, almost dehumanizing portrayal.
Wow. Okay. The audio also gets into technology, right? Fears about tech and control.
It does, yeah. There's this belief mentioned about a program being set up to phase out humans.
Phase out humans.
Yeah, bring in robots, make people obsolete. That's the fear expressed.
And is there a connection made to the elites again?
Yes. The speaker claims these elites know technology can be dehumanizing, so they actually limit their own kids' access to it. The implication being they don't care about the effect on everyone else.
Right, a sort of technological hypocrisy alleged there. And finally, the speaker looks ahead. Predictions, warnings. What do they see coming?
One big warning is about censorship, specifically predicting communist Chinese-style net censorship coming to the internet.
So clamping down on free speech online.
That's the fear.
Yeah.
But it's not all doom and gloom in their view.
Oh, how so?
The speaker also talks about the desire for liberty, the threat of being made obsolete. They believe this is actually, quote, reactivating the human life force potential, a kind of awakening.
An awakening against these forces.
Sort of. They claim the enemy actually knows, based on algorithms or something, that they lose in the future. that these mass movements will win out.
So why are they fighting then?
According to the speaker, they're trying to convince people now that they've already lost, trying to demoralize them. There's even this analogy to Terminator 2.
Terminator 2, Skynet.
Yeah, like Skynet sending a Terminator back because it knew it was losing the war, trying to change the past because the future's already lost for them. It's a striking image.
Definitely a vivid analogy. So despite all the attacks, the censorship fears, there's this underlying belief in eventual victory for the people.
That seems to be the ultimate message, yeah.
Okay, so looking back at everything we've unpacked, what are the main takeaways here?
Well, you've got this core narrative. A president fighting against powerful, hidden, sort of global forces, trying to restore national sovereignty.
Facing attacks from all sides, banks, media, even his own government.
Right. And the speaker positions themselves as a key voice, exposing all this, reaching millions, fighting back against this perceived establishment. It's a very defined conflict they're describing.
It really is. And the language is incredibly strong, the stakes presented as incredibly high.
Which I think brings us to a good question for you, the listener. After hearing all this, considering the intensity of these claims, the huge scope of the accusations, what further questions does this deep dive raise for you about the political and economic situation today, and maybe about how different people interpret the same events?